The House will please come to order. Good morning. Welcome to the 7th day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature's budget session. We see we have a committee that's still meeting, so we'll begin our morning with Reverend Veit and our prayer of the day.
Today, I'd like to offer you a collect for the morning, very appropriate for the day. Let us pray. Almighty and compassionate God, in whom we live and move and have our being, you have brought us in safety to this new day, and we are grateful. We humbly pray you so to guide and govern us by your Spirit, that in all the cares and occupations of our lives and in the business set before us, especially with these your representatives and in all those involved with legislation, we may not forget you, but may remember that we are ever walking in your sight in that way of love, through our one and holy life-giving God. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Veit. We'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. All right, members, like I said, we still have a committee. Maybe it's coming in right now. I'll make just a couple announcements before we begin. Let a few more people get on the floor before we do roll call. On your desks, you will see a potential rule that the body may take up later today. There are other copies outside. As you know, we now have, there's 3 members that are off the floor. We're entering into a time of a lot of important work that we do on behalf of our state. And I want to give, at least it's my hope, that we give all of our members full access to that process for the specific public health purposes, not because it's convenient and you got chores to do at home, which I could have that excuse, but that you are have a health concern regarding participation in person. So we'll take that up later on in the day. Our order of business today will be to finish out the budget. So our Appropriations Committee will be finishing out the budget, and I understand they maybe weren't quite prepared for that to be the first order of business, but as you know, yesterday when we left the budget open. We left it open on committee of the whole. So it's certainly, I think, in best order is to complete our work on the budget, and then we'll go on with additional work. I believe it's in the majority floor leader's intention is we'll get some other bills up on committee of the whole later in the day. But certainly we'll start with the budget bill. So with that, let's call the roll.
Convening roll for the 7th day, Tuesday, February 22nd, 2022. Andrew. Baker. Banks. Bear. Blackburn, excused. Brown. Burkhart. Burt. Clausen. Connolly. Grego. Duncan. Eklund. Air. Flittner. Fortner. Gray. Greer. Hallinan. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Jennings. Kenner. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson Dan. LeBeau. McGuire. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Oakley. Obermuller excused. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Paxton. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Romero Martinez. Roscoe. Schwartz. Sherwood. Excused. Simpson. Summers. Stith. Stivar. Sweeney. Walters. Washit. Western. Worf. Worf. Excused. Williams. Wilson. Winter. Excused. Yin. Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker.
Reading clerk, I think the Blackburn should be excused. I don't see him in the room, and he should be excused.
Should
He's
be
shown as
excused.
present on the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 54 here, 6 excused.
Thank you very much. Journal Committee report.
Your Journal Committee reports to the Journal of February 21st, 2022 has been read and recommends that it be approved. Representative Provenza.
Thank you. Reports from standing committees.
House Bill 10, sponsored by Select Tribal. Tribal reference amendments, an act relating to tribes of the Wind River Indian Reservation. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 10, Tribal Reference Amendments, respectfully reports same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Crago, excuse me, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Swanitzer. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 51, sponsored by Representative Banks, prohibiting the release of mugshots unless convicted, an act relating to criminal history records. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 51, prohibiting the release of mugshots unless conviction, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Yin, Swanitzer. Noes. Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Rodriguez Williams, Washit. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 71, sponsored by Representative Crago, driving while license suspended, enhancement amendment, an act relating to driver's licenses. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 71, driving while license suspended, enhancement amendment, respectfully reports same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Zawanitzer. Noes. Representative Provenza. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 88, sponsored by Representative Harshman, name change notice publication of minors amendment, an act relating to civil procedure. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 1 Judiciary, to whom is referred House Bill 88, name change notice publication of minors amendment, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Crago, Larson Dan, Oakley, Olson, Provenza, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Yin, Swanitzer. Representative Olson, Chairman. House Bill 15, sponsored by Representative Summers, Political Subdivision Club Liquor License, an act relating to alcoholic beverages. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 15, Political Subdivision Club Liquor Licenses, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Clausen, Duncan, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Noes. Representative Ayre. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 56, sponsored by Management Audit, examination of books of certain districts and entities, an act relating to the Department of Audit examination of books of special districts and certain specified entities. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 56, examination of books of certain districts and entities. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Duncan, Ayre, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Excuse, Representative Clausen. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 60, sponsored by Management Audit, fiscal training and enforcement of financial reporting laws, an act relating to minimum fiscal procedures training for public officers. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom was referred House Bill 60, fiscal training and enforcement of financial reporting laws, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Duncan, Ayre, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Excused, Representative Clausen. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 76, sponsored by Representative Duncan, single office real estate brokers, licensing requirements, an act relating to professions and occupations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred House Bill 76, single office real estate brokers, licensing requirements. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Blackburn, Burt, Duncan, Ayre, LeBeau, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Excused, Representative Clausen. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. House Bill 131, sponsored by Representative Burkhart, nuclear power generation and storage amendments, an act relating to environmental quality. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 131, nuclear power generation and storage amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Burkhart, Duncan, Ayre, Greer, Heiner, Western. Noes. Representatives Baer and Gray. Excused, Representative Sherwood. Representative Greer, Chairman. House Bill 135, sponsored by Representative Andrew, General Regulatory Sandbox Program, an act relating to economic development. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred House Bill 135, General Regulatory Sandbox Program, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Baer, Duncan, Gray, Heiner, Western. Noes. Representatives Burkhart, Ayre, Greer. Excused, Representative Sherwood. Representative Greer, Chairman. House Bill 27, sponsored by Representative Fortner, Visitation Rights, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred House Bill 27, Visitation Rights, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes. Representatives Fletner, Hallinan, Ottman, Stivar, Wilson. Noes. Representatives Connolly, LeBeau, Romero Martinez, Wharf. Representative Wilson, Chairman. House Bill 108, sponsored by Representative Hallinan, Funeral Service Practitioner Amendments, an act relating to funeral service practitioners. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom was referred House Bill 108, Funeral Service Practitioner Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Connolly, Flitner, Hallinan, LeBeau, Ottman, Stivar, Worf, Wilson. Excused, Representative Romero Martinez. Representative Wilson, Chairman.
So members, order of business that I mentioned earlier was we'll go into the finish committee of the whole on the budget. And then, as you will note, we have 3 bills on third reading. It's our understanding that an amendment has just come out on one of them. There's an amendment being prepared on a second one. So that leaves 1 bill on third reading. So what my suggestion is, Majority Floor Leader is going to make a motion to lay all of those bills back one day so that people have time to see the amendments and understand the implications. So with that, there'll be the Majority Floor will make that motion, and then it'll be a voice vote. And if they are sustained by a majority, they'll be laid back one day. So, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to House Rule 7-3, I move to lay back one day House Bill 37, House Joint Resolution 5, and House Joint Resolution 6.
Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of the Majority Floor Leader's motion to lay back House Bill 37, House Joint Resolution 5, and House Joint Resolution 6, all those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The bills are laid back one day. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into Committee of the Whole to consider only the Budget Bill, House Bill 1.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Welcome back to first reading of the budget. We are at Agency 81, Board of Parole. Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I bring you Agency 81, Board of Parole. This will go very quickly, folks. It's on page 31 of your crib sheet, and you will notice that the only change to this budget for this biennium is in note 1 that we're restoring travel funds so that the actual members of the Board of Parole can physically go to the correctional institutions to sit physically in the same room with a potential parolee. As you may recall, during the pandemic, these were done remotely, and there's a sense that there's a degradation in the quality of decisions if you can't look the person in the eye. So that's the only change, $74,000. Just for the Board of Parole members, we should give a shout out to the members of the Board of Parole because their compensation for each day that they work is the same, and their per diem is the same as ours. So you all know what that's like. Anyway, having said that, I'll just stand for any questions.
Is there any discussion on Section 81? Seeing none, we'll close Section 81 and move on to Section 85, Wyoming Business Council. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I bring you Section 85, Wyoming Business Council. This is located on page 31 of your summary sheet and on page 59 of the budget bill. I draw your attention down to the notes at the lower end of page 31. The first 3 notes are requests from the agency to add 6 employees to their agency. The governor recommended only adding 2 of those employees. So we adopted the governor's recommendation on note number 1 to add 1 employee. We agreed with the governor and adopted his recommendation of adding 1 employee on footnote 2. At footnote 3, the governor denied their request to add 2 employees, and JAC denied that governor's request, and we recommended adding one of those employees. This employee will be recruiting out-of-state businesses for the state of Wyoming to relocate here. Notes 4, 5, and 6 are transfers of programs from this agency to other agencies. Note 7 is a reduction of an employee. The agency offered up a position they no longer needed. Governor recommended it. We adopted the recommendation. Notes 8 through 14 are governor's letters requests that we received in January. You'll notice that JEC denied all of the governor's requests in his letter number 17. We did, however, on notes 15 through 17, recognize some value in some specific agency requests, and which the governor denied, but we recommend consideration. So on item 15, $485,000 out of the general fund, one time, for additional recruiting resources and to assist the state and local economic development entities. Note number 16, the JEC, recommends adding $400,000 of general fund money for targeted industry development in the Wyoming Asia Pacific Trade Office. We currently have an office in Taiwan. This money will continue to fund that office, which is one employee, and the existing office. That office promotes primarily agricultural products in exchange in the Taiwan market. Note number 17 denied the governor's rec and added $5 million from the general fund for the Small Business Innovation Project Research Matching Grant Program. Item 18 is adopt the governor's rec of $375 out of special revenue to reduce the number of B11s that have transpired this last year. Mr. Chairman, that's the end of my report. I stand for any questions.
Any discussion on Section 85 Wyoming Business Council? Chairman Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just quick question as I worked through the budget book and I look at the exception requests, which most of them were denied. There's something that was a little bit of a concern to me, and I just wanted to ask if the Appropriations Committee followed up on this. And it was some of these heavy asks revolved around expanding the Business Ready Community program, or that component of it. And the Minerals Committee spent the summer with the Business Council being our number one priority, and we never received any of those suggestions. So when I saw this language put into the exception request, I was just curious what you were told, and maybe that was the reason why you went ahead and denied those. I'm just curious.
Representative Simpson, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, we have to recognize the Wyoming Business Council is all about investing in the future of Wyoming. And we evaluate the return on the investment in JEC. We evaluate each of these programs and each of these solicitations and determine in our minds whether or not they're good investments in the future. We had a lot of requests, and we admire the Wyoming Business Council. They are doing great things. They have great enthusiasm, great zest and zeal for what they do. There were just some that we just could not justify in our minds, and yet there were others that we thought were great ideas. Certainly adding the 3 staff members we thought was a great investment into Wyoming.
Representative Banks.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Line 8, in the Harvard Economic Development Program, denying the governor's recommendation for $5,000 for that. Do you know, does that completely eliminate that program, or is that just a portion of that program?
Representative Simpson.
This was a specific request that involved Harvard University, where they would come in and participate with the state of Wyoming to rethink how we are structuring our growth and development in our business sector. It was a $5 million request, and it was just a little bit too much for us. The governor requested it, and we denied that request.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, and to follow up on the Harvard business request, I and at least one other representative attended a very painful 1.5-hour presentation by the Harvard professors about this. And as much as I wanted to be in favor of it, it looked like the money was going to be spent for them to tell us what we already know about our economy. So that was these Nobel Prize winners, very, very impressive people, but it didn't seem like it'd be a great use of taxpayer dollars to give $3.5 million to some Harvard professors to tell us what you see every day on the ground. Thank you.
Representative Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my question's on footnote 1 on additional staff on retention and expansion. One staff member. What was the discussion around that? And what I think we have one staff member dedicated to retention, if that's correct. Would this add another person, is my understanding?
Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When it talks about retention and expansion, we're talking about business entities that exist in the state of Wyoming. It makes sense to us that we try to chase out-of-state corporations and invite them to come here, but we have many, many businesses in the state of Wyoming that have the potential for expansion, and we want to retain those and not let the other states try to steal them away from us. So this would add one additional body to that staff for supporting Wyoming businesses.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take a step back, if I could, a little bit to the good chairman of Minerals and talk to his question. I had a little different position than that of my colleague sitting over here, and really thought that this, over the course of the summer, when we looked about developing a policy governing how the state moves forward in energy and other things, that we needed to reach outside the box a little bit. And so this body, the legislature, has been a little gun shy on studies from outside sources. And I will concede that the presentation that I attended from the Harvard folks was less than stellar, but the approach up to that point was very convincing for me. And then after, as they recognized their less than stellar performance, done that. And so there is a B11 process that will fund that Harvard study, as well as part of the other that we had initially done. We kind of had a shift change, and the governor thinks that that's, or the executive, the big guy, thinks that that's an appropriate way. And so just to add a little more to that.
Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I too want to pile on with the denial of the governor's letters in 8 through 17. And I think I have two procedural questions. And one is there any relationship between those projects and the ARPA bill that will be getting Senate File 6? So that's a procedural question. And then the next one is, I really am curious about a denial when it was a general fund contingency, that it could be straight ARPA money that could have been used in order to fund these specific programs. And again, I think we need a whole lot more for the denial when we could be using federal money to do it. And where is that money going now instead? Thank you.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question revolves around the summary footnotes 8 through 14 and Governor's letter number 17. So in the letter, it references that the Wyoming Business Council has 10 projects that are ready to begin construction or final design. And this really only references 7. Could you let us know what the other 3 are? Thank you.
While Representative Simpson's looking at that, we'll go to Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And, you know, to my good friend from Fremont County, I appreciate the need that we have to have the resources to actually develop for the business, to develop business, to recruit businesses, okay? My question kind of comes back and maybe a little more pointed towards the majority floor leader's question, but I agree with the denial by the committee. But I am also very much concerned by the ask that was made of the committee, and this is what I'm getting to. Is the Business Ready Communities program is a statutory program for infrastructure. And the ask says business is changing, climates are changing, and we need to be able to change, and we need more money to change because there may not be enough money in the current budget to cover the statutory requirements or the statutory authority of that program. Which leads me to believe there's an intent to go outside of their statutory authority. Now, given the fact that we donated our summer to trying to find what statutory changes might be made, it is a concern to me because none were presented to us on the Minerals Committee. So I guess my question is, as you took that testimony and as you made that denial, did you ask those questions and what was your general impression?
Representative Simpson.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Simpson, go ahead.
Thank you. Let me try to do the best I can with those questions. To my knowledge, and I defer to my colleagues if I'm mistaken, items notes 8 through 14 were letters, requests from the governor, and to my knowledge, none of those are found anywhere else in ARPA bills or anywhere else. We've just rejected those concepts completely. To the request on note 11, I do not know what happened to those extra 3 projects were dropped off the list. I'm going to defer to Representative Larson to answer the last question.
Vice Chairman Larson, if you wish.
I'm thinking, Mr. Chairman, I would respond to the concerns of the chairman from Appropriations in that as we reviewed and looked at the requests based on their statutory authority, and both in conserved funds and ARPA funds, that we didn't see a definitive plan to maintain the direction for which we felt they were statutorily guided. Okay. Now, to the minority floor leader, as you read the governor's letter 17, take a little time to make sure that we delineate between, in his letter, the conserved funds and the ARPA direct funds. For example, in his letter on page 2, he has the BRC gap funding, but he's that will be a discussion in the direct ARPA. And so if you'll just please use those footnotes or those notes on the summary sheet and correlate those with what he had in his letter number 17, it kind of helps you in, because it in letter 17 it went both directions.
Vice Chairman McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll phrase this as a rhetorical question because I know that the presenter doesn't know, and that is, how many full and how many part-time employees does this department have? And if you look at the next sheet, we have another department that's failed. And if you recall, a couple of years ago in the reporting bill, I specifically put in an amendment that all of the agencies that had not reported do so. Because that's a very fundamental question. If we're going to exercise any kind of oversight one of the first questions that we should know is how big is that agency? Are they 5 people? Is it 100 people? We have no idea. So I would just put forth in the form of a question, but I would encourage you, we should do something in our policy to put some teeth into these reporting requirements. Because if we're going to do our job, which is oversight, the first fundamental question should be, how many people do they have in that department or that agency? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you. And at the nudging of the good speaker just before me, I do have the answer to that is 36 full-time employees. And the reason, of course, it's not shown on that is these are not state government FTEs, they're business council FTEs funded differently. His point is accurate, and I think that we do need to make sure that that is reflected into their budget requests on an annual basis so we can really get a feel for the size of that agency. But those are the numbers, and we'll take that to heart and fix.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've got a few questions, but principally, my questions are around the people, the manpower, and the capacity at the local level. And I've listened to the good Appropriations Committee and the testimony a few times, and I wonder how much consideration there was given to the size of this agency relative to the strategy for our overall state going forward over the next 5-10 years. But you know, the things like full-time or part-time, sure, but also things like, you know, AWEC versus, you know, a full-time employee with all the, you know, the benefits and costs associated with that. I know back in 2019, they had up to 59 or something like that. The effort was made, brought it down to the low 30s, like the good gentleman just mentioned. But with the proposed increases in the positions, I just want to clarify for our constituents where this agency is going. You know, I've had some good briefings, some good conversations with people in this agency. I think there's a lot of potential. But frankly, you know, as one speaker a couple ago mentioned, you know, we have a lot of opportunity that we're losing. I think if you please consider, the more we delay, the more we pay, right? So I just asked those questions relative to what is the sweet spot on the manpower that's going to get the job done for our state with this agency. You know, if you come to me and I'm the business counsel and you ask me to do something and I ask for more people, or I turn around and contract it out, what do you need me for, right? When I got out of the good university the first time in the 70s, the mid-70s, when the economy was in the tank and was coming out, we had stagflation, some other things, right? This agency was 5 people, a pass-through agency. It's largely pass-through now, but it does a lot of wonderful things for our community. And frankly, there's things, good things happening in economic development, I believe. Wouldn't you agree with this agency that's helping the local level? When we have rural areas across our state that are struggling to keep the doors open. So this is just a few questions. I'll have more, but I'll stand back. Thank you.
Vice Chairman Washit, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question, clarification. I believe I heard the lawyer from House District 48 tell us that the Harvard investment thesis was our funding request to tell us what we already know. And then I think I heard the vice chairman from District 54 tell us that there was going to be another way to fund that. And I'm just wondering, are we or are we not funding the investment thesis from Harvard? Thank you.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to answer that, so there was a review in that. We looked at that and looked at doing it in the ARPA bill. Now, the issue with it in the ARPA bill is the funds aren't available till we get done. And they really wanted to get that Harvard study going sooner. And so the governor has elected and has submitted a B11 process to appropriate those funds for that study. And I think that he hasn't signed that completely yet. We'll talk about B11s or flex authorization to do that using ARPA dollars here, because we give him that authority to use ARPA dollars up through 5th of March at his discretion but he had to notify us, and he's done that on this proposal. So, yeah.
Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to respond to the good representative from Cheyenne's question about the size of this agency. What is the sweet spot for any agency? You know, because this is an investment type of agency, some would suggest that this agency should just be done away with. We allow free enterprise to happen. Others in this body might suggest the sweet spot is twice as many as 36 employees, because we really want to invest in Wyoming and build their businesses and bring good things to Wyoming. So the sweet spot, there is no such a thing. It's all about the agency and the departments, that the employees are spread out through the departments, doing their job, trying to bring a return on the investment for the agency. And so I would suggest that the agency would like to have more bodies because they see some great things they can do. We've been conservative. We've given them the recommended three new employees and suggest that that's a comfortable place for us to proceed during the next biennium.
Further, Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that good answer. I would just say that there is a sweet spot in business, and it's called where your average variable costs equal your average revenue, what your potential income is. In this agency, my biggest concern for our state and for our communities is the capacity that this agency helps bring to the local level, right? And I think that we need to look hard, long and hard, at having the resources at too high a level, perhaps, going forward, given the turbulence of these times economically and the pressure on fossil fuel and so forth, that we need to look more at how can we get more federal dollars at play, like we said, in terms of economic development districts, perhaps. We have a Front Range Rail coming up here. There's a lot of technology, new technology, so I just wanted to see what in this budget is specifically going to help the local level in terms of capacity. Thank you.
Further discussion on Section 85, Wyoming Business Council. Seeing none, we'll close Section 85 and move to Section 90, Wyoming Energy Authority. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For an explanation of Agency 90, the Wyoming Energy Authority, please refer to page 32 on your summary sheet and page 60 in your bill. And Mr. Chairman, the Wyoming Energy Authority is the combination of what was the Wyoming Infrastructure Authority and the Wyoming Pipeline Authority. This reorganization is noted in summary notes 3 and 4. And Mr. Chairman, JAC adopted the Chief Executive's recommended standard budget and took the following action. JAC adopted Chief Executive Letter number 13 of $400,000 for energy-related project assistance. This will allow the WEA to keep pace with the expected federal money related to energy project opportunities in Wyoming. And JAC adopted Chief Executive Letter number 17 for $650,000 for grant managers and grant writing assistance. And are there any, that is the summary of what the JAC did for the Wyoming Energy Authority. Are there any questions?
Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll close Section 90 and open Section 96, the State Budget Department. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I bring you the State Budget Department. You may recall that this just became an agency about 2 years ago. Before that, it was in the lodged in the A&I. So there are 8 requests. All of these requests are basically filling out components of that office. You've got the iBars hosting for the first two, Microsoft Office for number 4, Adobe Acrobat number 4, budget books for 9,000 is number 5, and the remainers are IT technology. So basically, it's a very simple exception request and just the standard budget. So, thank you.
Discussion on section 96. Seeing none, we'll close section 96 and go to section 98, the Office of the Guardian Ad Litem. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 98, the Office of Guardian Ad Litem, page 61 in your budget book, 33 on your summary sheet. For those who are unaware of this agency, it's one of our smaller ones. They provide in 22 of Wyoming's 23 counties representation for children in abuse and neglect cases, in CHINS cases, and in juvenile delinquency cases. And you will note of their budget of $5 million, 25% of that is special revenue, which is the 25% match required by the counties to participate. That's a quick summary. I will answer any questions.
Discussion on Guardian Ad Litem. Seeing none, we'll close section 98, Guardian Ad Litem, and go to section 101, Wyoming Supreme Court. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you the budget for the Wyoming Supreme Court. I'm just going to quickly run through these items. So the first is one additional full-time employee, number 1. This transitioning a library position to an administrative position. That's for $206,000. Number 2 is a one-time for copiers. Number 3 is a caseload study that they're required to do every so many years, and that's how they determine how many judges they need. Number 4, we denied Governor's Judicial number 1, requesting courthouse security, but that's an ongoing issue on who is responsible for it and how much it's going to cost. And we funded a bunch of it in the prior sessions, so that we just denied that one. Number 5, just for travel on the commissioner's site, for the commissioners, court commissioners. Number 6, $406,000 for chamber staff. So number 6, number 7, and number 8 are funding and setting up the Chancery Court. And in fact, that goes down to 9, 10, and 11. So those are all Chancery Court. You may recall that that's going to be housed in Casper, and so now we have to basically provide all the mechanisms in order to operate the Chancery Court. So then let's go down to number 13, another copier. 14 is another copier. Cell phones for number 16. So once again, it's just these items, they're required because they're one-time expenditures to pass through JAC. Independent care coverage, the 17 is a cell phone cost, same thing. Number 18 is one of the larger ones, 1.7 million. This is the appellate court management system. And for e-filing upgrades, it hasn't been upgraded in, I think, 12 years, and it's a bit archaic, so it was just time to replace that. Next, we have another cell phone, and then 2 judicial letters. We denied the request for a $1.5 million for the data sharing interface, and we denied the judicial letter number 1 on the 3-time at-will employees for part-time. The appropriations will bring in an amendment in second or third reading, returning those 3 positions. I talked about that in our opening statements. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Vice Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple with regards to item 4, the courthouse security. Could you give us a little more detail about which courthouse this funding was for, and, or multiple courthouses, and what the request was, and the rationale for not funding this when we did fund some in the past? And also more generally, I've seen this in several of these items, GF little letter C. I know what the GF stands for. Can you explain what the little letter C after a general fund listing denotes? Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas.
So with regards to the courthouse security, I think our emphasis at the time was really a budgetary considerations. If we looked at the number of requests that the Supreme Court asked for, a $2.5 million in exception requests and around considerable other requests for the ARPA dollars, and we granted most of their requests. And so it was just where we're going to draw the line in terms of how much we were going to fund for security. And so we thought that the easiest one to take care of was the security. So it'll come back next year, and so we'll continue to fund that as we go from courthouse to courthouse. I don't have with me the what specific projects that was, but I can get that for you.
Representative Gray?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask about the utilization study. I feel like they've already done this a number of times, and I just wanted to ask what is the discussion on how often they need to do this? My memory on the Judiciary Committee is that once they did it every 2 to 3 years, they had the inputs to kind of build what the utilization for each judge was. And then we don't need to keep just redoing this with another 300 grand, another 300 grand, another 300 grand every single year, especially with a bill that fixes all the district court issues, clears that off the deck. I know they want to now look at the circuit court issues, but I think this also applies to district court judges. So wanted to ask about that and if this is just going to be a recurring expenditure every single year. Thank you.
Further discussion? Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in response to that question, there are guidelines on how often you need to do it. And this particular study hasn't been done, in my understanding, since 2012. So they're actually about 5 years behind times. But I don't disagree with the concept that is sometimes you get studies in order to self-perpetuate your existence. And that's just a balancing act that we have to monitor. So thank you.
Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the two items, the Chancery Court, just a couple of words, and then the e-filing. I've heard a lot of good conversation and positive things about the prospects of the e-filing. Thank you.
Further, Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the question previously about courthouse security, this was to be allocated not to exceed $75,000 per courthouse. There was no list, and they had simply stated that it would be allocated as needed. So that was just a follow-up on that question.
Seeing no further discussion on Wyoming Supreme Court, we'll close 101 and go to 102, the Board of Law Examiners. Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I bring to you Agency 102, Board of Law Examiners. As you'll notice, this agency has no employees. It's run by the State Bar. These are just the expenses of administering the bar exam and admission to the practice of law in Wyoming. About $141,000 of this appropriation over the biennium goes to contract services, which are essentially paying the lawyers to show up to grade the exams. And the rest is for support services, paying for the cost of the exams. No changes, no footnotes, and I'd stand for any questions.
Seeing none, let's go into section 103, the Commission on Judicial Conduct and Ethics. Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I bring you Agency 103, Commission on Judicial Conduct and Ethics. This agency has one employee. This is the agency that deals with if there's a complaint against a judge, then this agency deals with hearings, investigations, and the costs of doing that. No change to the standard budget, no changes by Joint Appropriations Committee. I'd stand for any questions.
Further questions of the Commission of Judicial Conduct? Seeing none, and seeing no one jumping to the mic, how about we just take 120 through 143 as a group? Representative Stiff, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members, I bring you the agencies 120 through about 142 or so, 143. These are all the district courts, and lo and behold, they are state agencies. Look at that. You'll see that coming up in a different bill, with their state agencies. There's not much going on here in the basic budget. You'll see slight changes where they're buying a computer or two. There's a special shout out to the district judge in Lander. That district court is actually reducing its staff by one or by a part-time person. And so there's $62,000 that they're reducing their budget by on a permanent ongoing basis. So that's good. You'll see there are bills coming over from the other body that deal with potentially adding new judges across our state. That is not dealt with here in the budget. That will be in Senate File 2526, and you'll have an opportunity to look at that when it comes over. And I would stand for any questions.
Any questions or discussions on any of our judicial districts? Give it just a second just to make sure. Seeing none, we'll close sections 120 through 143 and jump up to page 77 in your budget book to section 151, District Attorney, Judicial District Number 1. Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 151, District Attorney, Judicial District Number 1, page 43 of your summary sheet and page 77 of your bill. Mr. Chairman, the JAC adopted the Gov's Rec for the global IT, including in the global IT, the $13,000 there for information technology replacement. Note 2, we adopted the Gov's Rec of $9,000 general funds for telecommunications. And then note 3, the JAC adopted the Gov's Rec for $90,000 general fund for the e-prosecutor maintenance. And I would certainly try to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Discussion on Judicial District Number 1. Seeing none, let's jump to Judicial District Number 7, section 157. Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 157, District Attorney, Judicial District Number 7, page 44 of your summary sheet and page 77 of your bill. Note number 1, the JAC adopted the Gov's Rec of $167,000 and one full-time equivalent position for victim witness advocate. Note number 2, we adopted the Gov's Rec of $167,000 for one full-time equivalent person for a legal assistant. Those were both areas where we needed to help them catch up on the workload. Note number 3, JAC adopted the Gov's Rec of $90,000 for the e-prosecutor maintenance, similar to the last one. And note 4, JAC adopted the Gov's Rec of $41,000 for the Westlaw subscriptions. And I'm happy to be answering any questions.
Questions on Judicial District 7? Seeing none, we'll close that section and go to our county and prosecuting attorneys on section 160. Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 160, County and Prosecuting Attorneys, page 44 on your summary sheet and page 78 of your bill. Mr. Chairman, the JAC denied the Gov's Rec in this case, and we did add $499,000 effective immediately to restore reimbursements for prosecuting attorneys and added footnote number 1. This is just a catch-up, and as you can see, we restored the reimbursements, and they're paid in the arrears, and so we had to catch that up just due to the number of cost increases. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'd happy to answer any additional questions.
Seeing none, let's move on to the next page. On page 78, we're going to jump to section 205, Education School Finance. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you section 205, Education School Finance, page 45 of your summary sheet, 78 of your budget. Fundamentally, this agency is managing the funds that we use for K-12 education. So it's a very large figure. You'll see it. It's $1.765 billion. There are 4 notes on this one. Numbers 1 and 3 are related. And what they are, they prepare this budget in the summer. So the first note, number one, are adjustments that they needed to make when they presented this to the committee, based on things like changes in enrollment, changes in health insurance payments, updates to the ad valorem. Then you'll go to number three, which is superintendent's letter number one. And this is essentially because number one was done in October, this is now the January update to the total number of dollars that are required to fund K-12 education. Note number two, we decreased the amount in governor's letter number 5. This was the ECA. The governor recommended a 1-year appropriation for the ECA. It was the determination of the committee that all we were going to authorize was the ECA for energy and supplies, which came to $10 million of the $37 million request. Note number 4, the JAC reduced the appropriation going to the National Board for Certification for Teachers. This is a program where the teachers get certified. They receive a $4,000 approximately bonus in their salaries, and the committee determined to pay half of that. And I will stand for any questions.
Any questions on section 205? Not seeing any. We'll close section 205 and move on to section 206, Department of Education. Nope. Oh, Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So I just want to get this right on the ECA. So we're going to give a raise to state employees, but we're not going to give a raise to teachers. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chairman Larson wants that one.
That's a little disingenuous. That's up to the school boards whether they give a raise or not.
Any follow-up to that from Appropriations Committee members? Representative Stith?
Mr. Chairman, as we discussed a couple of days ago, the school districts received $303 million in ESSER 3 funds under the ARPA bill. 10% went to the Wyoming, to our state department. The balance, about $270 million, went out to the schools. And under ARPA, they're specifically allowed to use that for increased compensation. So $270 million.
Further discussion on section 205? Seeing none, let's go to 206, the Department of Education. Back up, Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So moving on to section 206, the Department of Education, that's page 46 on your summary sheet, 80 in the budget. This is not the funding for K-12. This is for the entity that manages all of our school districts and helps them to provide the education. So going to the notes, if you look at number 1, which is also footnote number 1, this authorizes the agency to spend up to $50,000 for the purposes of the Wyoming. It was the school lunch program where we wanted school districts to use local meats to feed the children. So that's what that first one is. I'm going to jump around a little bit. The next 3 notes are simple adoptions, mostly for tech. Numbers 5 and 6, you will notice, are for transitions for the state superintendent, and we have that twice. In all the other offices, it was only once, but because of the resignation a few weeks ago of the elected state superintendent, we had to do a transition now, and then there's potentially another transition coming up after the November election. Note number 7, you'll see the JAC reduced funding on the Hathaway, but what that actually is, the administration of the Hathaway scholarships was being done with school foundation program money, and in an effort to direct that school foundation money to actual education, we replaced the funding there with revenues coming from the Hathaway scholarship itself. You will now notice in numbers 8, 9, 10, 11, 13, 14, 15, and 16, these are all federally funded positions that are moving around. And what the department does, as federal grants come in, they have employees that they move around to different units to manage these federal grants, which are used to do things like assessments for teachers, leadership programs, and the like. And it just gives them the flexibility to not add staff, but to use their staff in the most efficient way possible. And other than that, we have adopted all of the other governor's recommendations. I will highlight number 17, which is a significant amount of money, $65 million of federal funding. And we are giving the department the authority to spend that money. And then the same is true of number 18, which is spending authority for federal dollars going to rural and low-income schools. And that summarizes the Department of Education. I will stand for any questions.
Questions on Section 206, Department of Education? Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just looking at footnote 1, authorizing the agency to expend up to $50,000 for the purposes of processing donated Wyoming meat. Was there any testimony in JAC that attested to how many school districts are utilizing that program, and whether or not, if they're not utilizing that program, where does the money go back to?
Representative Schwartz, if you know.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for that question. My understanding, I don't remember the exact number of school districts. It's not a lot of them, but that all of the money was being used.
Further discussion on Section 206? Seeing none, we'll close 206 and go to 211, the Board of Equalization. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Agency 211, Board of Equalization. This is found on page 47 of your summary sheet, page 82 of the bill. Mr. Chairman, the Board of Equalization has two primary missions which are set out within the Constitution and through state statute. The first is the board adjudicates taxpayer appeals from decisions of the Department of Revenue, Department of Transportation, and appeals from the 23 county boards of equalization. The second is the board evaluates the performance of county assessors using procedures established by statute. Additionally, the board reviews all local and state valuations and levies, including mobile machinery levies. The board also verifies the necessary school foundation levies with the state auditor and the state treasurer. And Mr. Chairman, the chief executive, the JAC adopted the chief executive's recommended standard budget of $1.4 million and 5 personnel with no exception requests. Are there any questions?
Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I had someone pretty high up in the property tax world joke to me one time that it's impossible for a residential appellee to win an appeal in the state of Wyoming. And with what we've seen in the Trona County experience with some of the property tax problems up there, the state board has weighed in on the side of the assessor. And I guess, has there been any testimony to the Appropriations Committee about how often the State Board of Equalization is siding with a taxpayer versus the county Board of Equalization versus the county assessor, and what the performance in terms of the state board, the number of cases that they're considering, and what the results are? Do you receive testimony on that? Thank you.
Representative Schwartz. No comment?
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Moving on, yes. Agency 270, the Office of Administrative Hearings.
Oh, before you do that, let's see if we're going to stay with the Board of Equalization 211. 220 Environmental Quality Council. Go ahead, Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move Did you want to answer that?
Go ahead on
Thank you,
220.
Mr. Chairman. I'd
HCC.
like to address Section 220 of the Environmental Quality Council found on the bottom of page 47 of the summary sheet and on page 82 of the budget bill. Mr. Chairman, this budget remains the same as it was last year. There are no notes, and we had adopted the governor's rec. For those of you who may not be familiar, this is a 7-member board that are appointed by the governor and serves to hear contested hearings on issues in the environment, in the Department of Environmental Quality, and then to address and look over rulemaking for each of the divisions in the Department of Environmental Quality. With that, I'd answer any questions.
Questions on Environmental Quality Council? Seeing none, we'll close that and go to the Office of Administrative Hearings, Section 270. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for my previous lack of attentivity. So, bringing Section 270, the Office of Administrative Hearings. It's on page 47 of your summary sheet. This is a self-funded agency. What they do is handle appeals, mostly that come through the department that manages our roads and the like, and our department that manages our workforce. So the bulk of the hearings they have are workers' comp and revocation of driver's licenses. There are no notes, and I will stand for any questions.
Questions on the OHA? Seeing none, we'll close Section 270. We're now entering the part of the budget for our boards and commissions, and instead of going in order, I believe there's a couple of different ways we're going to sort that. I'll turn it over to Representative Kinner to explain, and then if we need any clarification, we'll ask for any. But go ahead, Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I am going to go through boards and commissions and going to start with that, and then we have a couple other members that are going to help out. I want to remind all of you that if you do have any questions and you want to dive into the boards and commissions a little deeper, right outside Majority Floor Leader Summers' offices is a book. There's 2 books about an inch thick that contain all the information about the budget. So this is just a high-level overview, but you're welcome to look at those budget books. So, ladies and gentlemen, on your bill, pages 83 through 99, and also in the summary sheet, page 48 through 60, that's for the professional boards and commissions. And because there were no changes from the standard budget and the JAC adopted the governor's rec, I'm going to just list off all of those that was the case with no budget changes. Section 12, Board of Architects and Landscape Architects. Section 16, Board of Barber Examiners. Section 17, and by the way, Board of Barber Examiners did not have to take a haircut. Section 17, Board of Radiological and Technologist Examiners. Section 22, Board of Respiratory Care. We didn't take the breath out of their budgets. Section 28, Board of Registration and Podiatry. Section 30, Board of Chiropractic Examiners, no adjustments needed. Section 31, Collection Agency Board. Section 34, Board of Dental Examiners, nothing to sink our teeth in there. Section 35, Board of Funeral Directors, last persons to let you down. Section 36, Board of Midwifery. Section 46, Wyoming Combat Sports Commission, we didn't want to argue there. Section 52, Board of Medicine. Section 54, Board of Nursing. Section 56, Board of Examiners and Optometry. We saw clearly there. Board 61, Board of Certified Public Accountants. Board 62, Board of Physical Therapy. No sore muscles. Board of 64, Board of Hearing and Specialists. We're listening. Board of 65, Board of Athletic Trainers. Board 68, Board of Psychology. We did not need their help. Board 75, Board of Outfitters and Guides. We didn't want to get lost. Section 83, Board of Occupational Therapy. Section 84, Board of Professional Geologists, and 251, Section 251, Board of Veterinary Medicine, in case we didn't have a doctor of the day, and Section 252, Board of Acupuncture. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then we'll turn it over to...
He'll be here all week. Again, members, those are all the boards and commissions that don't have any changes to their standard budget. But I would give anyone a chance, if they do have questions about those boards or commissions, to come forward. Not seeing any on those boards or commissions, but now we'll go to the boards and commissions that do have changes. And first up will be Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I present to you Agency 18, the Real Estate Commission, and our generic description of what it is on page 49 of your crib sheet. Our generic description is multiple revisions to increase or ratify budget due to salary increases enacted during the FY 2021-22 biennium. So this is a fun one, if frustrating. So in our budget bill from 2 years ago, we told the agencies, if you've got Series 900 money, which is for contract services, whether that's for landscaping or a consultant, you're not allowed to transfer Series 900 money to Series 100, where your payroll is, right? Because we don't want them taking money for consultants and experts and just using it to pay themselves extra salary. Okay, so it's like in the elevator of the budget. If you're on the 9th floor, the 900 series, you're not allowed to go to the first floor, Series 100. So what did the money on the 900 series in this agency actually do? Well, the money on the 900 series was bored being on the 9th floor, but it knew it was not allowed to go down to the first floor, to Series 100. So instead, it took the budget elevator from the 9th floor down to the 200 series. 200 series is where you can buy computers and do computer maintenance contracts, things like that. The money gets off the elevator, looks around, decides it doesn't, spends 24 hours there, realizes that it doesn't really want to buy any computers or maintenance contracts, gets back on the elevator and says, I can go back home to Series 900 where I belong. But you know, although I'm not allowed to go from 900 to 100, there's nothing in the budget that says I can't go from Series 200 to Series 100. I think I'll go down to Series 100. And so it takes the budget elevator down to Series 100, gets off the elevator and says to the employees in the Series 100, you get a raise, and you get a raise, and you get a raise. And so the money in the 900 series was used to offer pay increases during a time when we were cutting $431 million out of the budget. So that's what happened. That actually happened. It's done. So we swallowed hard, ratified that, told them not to do that again. In Section 307 of the budget, as you'll see, there's the continued prohibition on doing that sort of thing. And that's the story with Agency 18. I stand for any questions.
Any discussion on the Real Estate Commission, Section 18? Seeing none, we'll move on to, how about Section 19, the PTSB? Representative Stith?
Members, Agency 19, Professional Teaching Standards Board, just very few changes in this agency. Some computer replacements, an additional $3,000 for examination supplies, an additional amount for credit card processing fees, but nothing frankly material. And I would stand for any questions.
Further discussion on Agency 19, Professional Teacher Standards Board? If not, let's take a quick privilege of the floor. And Representative Simpson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Privilege of the floor. Folks, I'm going to give you a chance to stretch your legs. I'd like for you to welcome my friends from Star Valley. We have the Star Valley Middle School Student Council and their advisors, Mr. Milne, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Hale, Ms. Fraser, and the bus driver, Ms. Imeson. Please welcome our folks.
Thank you, student leaders, and welcome to the House. We trust you will all be joining our ranks about a decade into the future. With that, let's go to Agency 33, the Board of...
Mr. Chairman, may I have privilege of the floor?
I suppose. Madam Minority Floor Leader, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Friends, the coffee mugs are now downstairs. They are over in Pam's office right here. To remind you, they cost $5 each. I have the official posted from the Majority Caucus last year that you wanted a minimum of 80 of them. That's more than fine. Take as many as you want or need. They cost $5 each. Again, right over here. Thanks.
All right, back to 30 more minutes on the budget. With that, 33, Board of Cosmetology, Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I present to you Agency 33 Board of Cosmetology, and I want to apologize to the members because everything I just said about the money for the information technology replacements and the $3,000 for examination supplies, that actually applies to this Board of Cosmetology. And so if my mind just reverse going back on the Board of Professional Standards Board, Agency 18, if I could just go back to that briefly to give the correct information to the members, that's on page 49 of your crib sheet to the Professional Standards Teaching Board. There's a little bit more going on. There is one full-time equivalent position that was changed. It was changed from full-time equivalent to an at-will employee contract position and from an AWAC to a full-time equivalent position. Sorry, that's $147,000 special revenue, and that takes into account additional employee benefits that the AWACs don't get. And then there's a $494,000 special revenue appropriation, again, in Professional Teaching Standards Board, Agency 19, for the educator credentialing system. So I apologize for not having said that a moment ago, but I would stand for any questions.
Questions on sections 19 or 33? Representative Sweeney, you do? Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. On Board of Cosmetology, was there any discussion at all on combining the barber with Board of Cosmetology?
Representative Stith, any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question, interesting policy question. Perhaps we take that up for an interim topic. I don't know. To my recollection, that was not discussed.
Seeing no further discussion, let's go to the Paramutual Commission, Agency or Section 38. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Going to the Paramutual Commission, Section 38. This is on page 53 of your summary sheet. It's a little more complex than many of these other boards, and I will highlight note number 1 because that kind of gives it away, in which we are saying that references to the Paramutual Commission are now being transferred to the Wyoming Gaming Commission. And so they are now taking over the responsibilities for all of the expanded gambling that we have approved statutorily in this body. Most of the following ones involve, if you go through numbers 2, 3, 4, they are adding employees so that the Gaming Commission can manage all of the new gamblings. Particularly, I would reference sports betting, which is added complexity to their operations. The others are mostly IT. I will then highlight numbers 12 and 13, which are part of the effort to reduce the number of B11s. And what these dollars are, the one, number 12, is $6 million of revenues that will go to local governments from the gambling operations. And number 13, which represents $1.6 million, which will go to the LSRA. And that concludes Agency 38. I would stand for any questions.
Any discussion on the Paramutual Commission? Seeing none, we'll move on to Section 43, the Dietetics Licensing Board. Representative Schwartz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agency 43 Dietetics Licensing Board, we adopted the governor's recommendation to increase funding for administrative costs. I stand for any questions.
Seeing none, how about the Board of Examiners of Speech and Language Pathology, 58?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 58, speech and language pathology. Once again, we adopted the Gov's rec for administrative costs plus for DCI background checks. I would stand for any questions.
Still seeing none, how about 59, the Board of Pharmacy?
Agency 59, the Board of Pharmacy, we adopted the Gov's recommendation for IT and licensing of software. Stand for any questions.
Seeing no discussion on that. Let's go to the Board of Nursing Home actually, the Mental Health Professionals
Thank
Licensing
you,
Board in
Mr. Chairman.
78.
Mr. Chairman, Agency 78, Mental Health Professions Licensing Board. Once again, we adopted the Governor's rec for administrative costs. Stand for any questions.
Seeing none, appropriations got agreeable towards the end of the day, apparently. How about Section 79, the Board of Nursing Home Administrators?
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, Agency 79, Board of Nursing Home Administrators, to conclude all of our independent and supportive boards, we, the JAC, adopted the Governor's rec for administrative costs and professional contracts. I stand for any questions.
Any further questions on boards or commissions? Not seeing any, so we're about to break into the Section 300s of the budget, but before we do so, Vice Chairman Larson, I'll give you the floor and go over some stuff we missed yesterday.
So, members, there's two things I need to go over with you, if we may. One is you've got a handout that references Senate File 66, which is going to be our ARPA bill, okay? If you find that in there, I just want you to latch on to it. You don't need to look at it, but as you get ready, you're going to be contemplating second reading amendments for the budget bill and wondering what might be in the ARPA bill. This will, you can take this and kind of quick reference into the ARPA bill and see what funds are available, and that may or may not impact your second reading amendments, but just wanted to have you have it as you get ready to do that. Then the second thing, Mr. Chairman, is as we vote on this bill, it's important to make sure that we're voting. Our job is to make sure you have the information to where you can make an accurate vote. And and maybe some of you have received a pretty significant number of emails from our constituents with concern that we've got language in the budget bill where we're going to expand Medicaid, okay? And I think that I have found the problem or where that concern may originate from. So if you please would turn in your budget bill, it's in the Department of Health and it's on page 36 and 37, and it's footnote 1. And if you would just write on there, this is not Medicaid expansion, and I will explain to you what it is. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, but I know that that gets complex. This has been in our budget bill every year since 2016. But if you look at it, it gives the director of the Department of Health, with consent of the governor, the ability to enter into negotiations with the feds. And then if you go to line 4, it says the director, with consent of the governor, is authorized to execute any necessary prudent state Medicaid plan amendments to carry out the footnote. And so I can see where constituents around the state might read that and get concerned. But what this is, if you read the rest of the language up there on line 2, it's of the scope of inpatient, outpatient hospital supplemental payments to physicians and other professionals, service providers affiliated with the hospital. And recall yesterday when I was saying that the hospitals tax themselves, and then they take that fee that they've assessed themselves and submit it to the Department of Health to increase the state's portion of Medicaid reimbursement to capture a higher rate from Medicaid. So then when they're reimbursed, they get their portion back and they divide up that federal portion. That's an upper payment limit. So we do that with hospitals, we do it with nursing homes, and we do it with emergency medical services this year. But that is not Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Care Act. It is not. This pertains to hospitals and how they recapture their Medicaid reimbursement. So if you're seeing some of those emails, perhaps they're confusing that and just want to, so when you're voting on the bill, I don't want you to vote on it thinking that we've put this in there to expand Medicaid. It's been in there every year since 2016. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we're off to the races on Section 300s.
Okay. Moving on to Section 300 on page 100 of your budget bill. First up will be the budget balancers transfer, Section 300. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring you Section 300, ladies and gentlemen. So budget balancers, what does that mean? Basically, all the actions that we take in this budget and other bills where we're moving money around to pay for what this body and the body down the hall approve, this is where the money transfers. And this is how we accomplish the funding for the various projects that we've been talking about and we'll talk about through the rest of the session. And it'll be modified depending on our actions. So just to run through them really quickly, subsection A is a budget balancer that permits movement of funds from the general fund from the BRA as needed for cash flow. Subsection B, this transfer moves unappropriated funds from the BRA over 115 million to the LSRA on June 30th, 2024. You'll see this in your profile on page 3, line 12. Right now, that's estimated to be $257 million. So subsection C, this relates to school major maintenance and provides a transfer of funds from the school capital construction account to the school major maintenance sub-account within the SIPA or the state land and mineral fund royalty account. Subsection D, this subsection is not effective if House Bill 34 is enacted into law. It was not enacted into law because it did not pass the bill. Subsection E, this is the first transfer that relates to school capital construction, and it moves $4 million from the SFP reserve account to the school capital construction account. And we'll see the other two transfers a little bit further down. Subsection F, this transfer includes movement of $133.5 million from general fund to the SIPA. This is for energy matching funds that we've talked about for the porous media university block that has been proposed by appropriations and for capital construction expenditures from SIPA. Subsection J, this transfer relates to energy matching funds and moves $100 million from SIPA to the LSRA. Subsection G, this transfers part of the JAC deposits into savings that we've talked about, $75 million general fund to the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund. So those are part of our, basically ARPA conserved dollars. Subsection H, this transfers part of the JAC deposits into savings again, $75 million for general fund into the common school account. Going down to subsection K, this is the second and third transfer that relates to the school capital construction account. First, $14 million from SIPA to the school capital construction account. Second, $45 million from LSRA to the school capital construction account. Subsection M, this subsection sets the priority of 3 transfers of funds to be for school capital construction account. The first is the school SFP reserve account in subsection E that I just talked about. Second is SIPA in subsection K. And third is the LSRA in subsection K2. Next, subsection N. This transfers amounts after the reduction of local government mineral royalties, the MRG funds, in the Office of State Land Investments, funding outstanding obligations, or appropriations, excuse me, and transfers will be $6.1 million from S4 to the general fund. Finally, the outstanding appropriations from the local government mineral royalty grant programs include $4.1 million in YDOT for the local share of Wyoming, $3 million for OSLI for administration and state matching funds for the Safe Drinking Water Revolving Fund, and $8 million for the Business Council for the BRC program. Thank you.
Any questions on section 300? Seeing none, let's go to section 301, borrowing authority. Representative Kinner. Representative Gray, question on section 300. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The federal energy matching program, can that be used on a nuclear facility, on grants to a nuclear facility? Thank you.
Chairman Nicholas.
So the small nuclear program is eligible under those funds. So it can be used. That would be at the discretion of the governor.
Vice Chairman Larson.
And again, folks, there's a number of opportunities that the state has out there in developing energy in an energy policy, nuclear being one, carbon capture being one through Department of Energy, and the utility that provides that coal-fired generation also in hydrogen. And we want the governor to have some money in there available to be able to make those things happen, and if there's a matching fund requirement.
All right. With that, let's move on to section 301. Now, Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, these Section 300s continue on page 61 of your summary sheet and page 103 of your bill. And as a banker, you might imagine that I spent most of my career trying to prevent overdrafts, and we continue to do that here. This is the borrowing authority section, section 301, and there are three parts to that. In the first part, this is authorization for the state auditor to borrow from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account, the LSRA, if needed to assist with month-to-month cash flow. Now, the thing that's really important for me to note and for you to remember is that this is not to borrow when our expenses exceed our revenue. So it's not to cover deficiencies there. It's only just to cover month-to-month cash flow ups and downs. So I feel really good about that. Section B also is short-term in nature for the state treasurer to borrow up to $60 million also from the LSRA. If the need and timing should take place where we needed to help out the school capital construction account. And again, that will be repaid as soon as the funds are available, so very short-term in nature. And then item C there, the state treasurer is also authorized to borrow from the LSRA to meet cash flow requirements of the Hathaway Scholarship Program. Again, short-term in nature, and then it's to be repaid as soon as those funds are available. And that concludes Section 301.
Discussion on section 301, cash flow. Seeing none, section 302, borrowing authority for executive programs. Representative Kinner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So also on borrowing authority now for our chief executive, this gives our chief executive authorization to borrow from the LSRA up to $20 million specifically to fight wildland fires. And then as such, we ask that the chief executive let the Appropriations Committee, the President of the Senate, and the Speaker know immediately upon exercise of that authority. And that concludes Section 302.
Discussion on 302. Seeing none, let's move to section 303, carryovers. Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 303, folks, at the end of each biennium, unexpended, unobligated monies returns to the state. However, there are a few programs and agencies that we actually want them to keep money for specific purposes. So I'd like to address those with you. The first on page 104 of the budget bill. First is disaster contingency. The governor's office administers this, and we propose to allow him to carry over $500,000. Second is the capital cases, general funds. This isn't talking about our Capitol building. This is a situation where a resident has committed a crime and is being considered for the death penalty. So we're proposing that the Office of Public Defender be allowed to carry over $1,062,500, and those monies were appropriated originally from the general fund. Capital cases, other funds. So coming from a different source, we propose to allow the Office of Public Defender to carry over $187,500 of special funds. I forgot if those are capital. Sorry, I'll have to clarify that for you. Okay, the next is on page 106. Employee group health insurance, we would want to carry over those funds to the tune of $18,500,000. On page 107, brucellosis, we'd like to authorize Livestock Board to carry over $982,252 in general funds for that purpose. Livestock law enforcement account, we propose we allow the livestock law enforcement account to carry over $174,000 in their account. Mr. Chairman, that is all the carryover accounts we propose.
Discussion, Vice Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question on the carryovers for the capital cases. Once again, we allocate $500,000 in the regular budget, and now we're going to carry over another $1 million into that capital case funding. Just a question, have we ever expended more than $500,000 in a biennium for capital case litigation? And is it really necessary that this $1 million plus revert and be carried over?
Representative Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, we've heard testimony that capital cases could cost up to $10 million. And the reason this is because of all the specialists and attorneys and everything that goes into a capital case is significant. How quickly that would come in a biennium certainly would crowd the ability. We would certainly, under any particular capital case, be right back the following biennium asking for more money.
Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm just going to follow up on that. The question, which wasn't answered for this pot as well as I'm going to ask for the other ones as well, is how much, if any, was expended from this fund? And so I'm very curious about the capital case contingency or the capital case carryover, but also with these others. Are we spending out of them and are we adding to them?
Representative Simpson, if you know.
I'm sorry, I do not know if we are spending money along the way. I know that there are zero capital cases in front of us at this time.
Okay. Further discussion on section 303? Representative Ottman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To go along with that question, I was just wondering, as we allot this money, where is it? Is it with Department of Audit, or where might it be to show the balances in those accounts just for some transparency? And if it's been, and what it's been used for? Thank you.
Representative Simpson.
Mr. Chairman, the money resides in the Office of the Public Defender. It's itemized there, and what this legislation does is allow them to just carry that money forward into next year.
Now, seeing no further discussion regarding section 303, we'll go to section 304, employee benefits. Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I bring you section 304. This relates to the state's contribution to employee group health insurance. It's on page 108 of the budget bill. You'll see subsection A, Romanet I, deals with the period beginning December 1, 2022, ending November 30th, 2023. And then there are different amounts the state will be contributing depending upon what kind of health insurance coverage you elect. So for example, looking down on subsection D, sorry, if you elect family coverage, then the state will be contributing $2,446 per month during that year. So that's pretty generous. So if we have an employee who's making $50,000 a year as their base salary, if they elect family coverage, they're getting $2,446 a month, which is about $29,000 a year extra of real money that's being paid for their health insurance. They don't see it on their paycheck, of course, but that is the actual contribution that's being made and a real benefit to those employees. Then you'll notice if you turn over to the next page, Romanet 2 deals with the year after that, December 1, 2023 through November 30th, 2024. All of the numbers go up by about 6.7%. So that's the projected increased cost to the state of the employee group health insurance. Subsection B deals with retirees who retired before July 1, 2008, and they get a certain dollar amount contributed to their retiree health insurance depending upon their length of years of service, which is far less generous than if they're a current employee, but it's better than getting kicked in the head. So then skipping down to subsection G, the legislature requests, or we request them, the agencies for the retiree piece of this, which agency-wide came out to, I think, $2.7 million roughly for retiree health benefits. We're asking the agencies to include that in their standard budget going forward, which if that happens, then it might obviate the need to have that subsection in future years. I would stand for any questions.
Vice Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question here. I appreciate the understanding of how much money the state is going to be paying in for these employees. I'm just kind of curious if I can get a rough estimate of, let's use that same person who has a family of 4 and elects for subsection D here to go ahead, and what is the monthly out of pocket that's going to be coming out of the employee's pocket and out of their paycheck? Understanding that we know that the state will be paying $2,446. Just kind of like to get a rough idea of what a state employee would be having coming out of their paycheck. Thanks.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Chairman, members, I don't have an exact number for that. And the representative asking the question probably knows the answer better than I do. My understanding was that it's the state contribution is approximately 80 to 82% on average. I could be wrong about that. If I am wrong about the 82% figure, please correct me. Thank you. So that would mean the employee would be chipping in 18%, which is, 18% is less than 100%.
Yes, it is. Any further discussion on section 304? Not seeing any. We'll open up 305, flex for the executive branch. Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And folks, 305, 306, and 307 are similar, and they talk about flex authority, meaning that in the executive branch, they're able to take, within an agency, the chief executive can move 5% of the general fund budget within the agency, and then we give them the authority to move 5% from one agency to another during the course of the biennium. He does that through what we call a B11 process. So if you turn the page to 112 in your budget and look on line 15, this is a little statute trivia here, but the reference for the B11 is 921005 BII. Get it? B11. So when we reference B11, it's always because it references back to that statute. They can do that. They have the ability to do that flex authority or that B11 authority for for the period of the biennium that we've made the appropriation. There are, however, 2 exceptions to this, and that would be the Department of Health and Department of Corrections, where they have the ability to move 100% within the agency, within the department, the programs of the agency. On Section 306, it's very similar, except for this is for the judiciary, and they have the ability to move 5% in the Supreme Court and 5% in the district court of their general fund. And then in Section 307, Mr. Chairman, this is where we get into that, and it was referenced earlier, Series 100 in our budget bill is employees. Series 900 is contract labor, contract. We don't allow them to transfer from 100 to 900 or 900 to 100, except, again, we give superflex authority to the Department of Health and to the Department of Corrections. And let me help you understand kind of why we do that. Department of Corrections is a good example where perhaps at the penitentiary, if we didn't have enough staff, guard staffed, and they were hiring temporary law enforcement to come in there and do that, and had the budget to do that in the 900 series, but then through their efforts, they were able to hire full-time employees. They could transfer the funds from 900 up to the 100. They'd get rid of the contract guards and use that money to pay the full-time. So that's why and how you'd see that. Same at the, perhaps at the state hospital or the Life Resource Center. And then we also grant that authority in the public defender's office. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. Sometimes they have a hard time having a full-time employee and will use contract. And also we've allowed that in this bill for the governor's office in grant writing if they can find a full-time person to do that, or they may have to use contract. So that's 307, 306, and 305, and I'd take questions on any of those sections.
Any discussions on 305 through 307? Representative Ottman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the good representative. If you could help me understand, we had a previous discussion on a department where it went into the 200 series and then back and all that. Is there safeguards on this so that something like that doesn't happen again? Thank you.
Vice Chairman Larson.
Thank you. I think the reality of that situation is that's why our agencies and our boards have executive directors that monitor the actions of that and are caught. It's one of the things that we look at very closely when we review the budget is the expenditures in the Series 100 and 900, and we bring that up. And there's some that have that we see that are maybe, you would say this appears to maybe not be as clean as we would think it would be. The agency will then defend their position on why they moved from one series to the other series. But truly, that's why you have your CFOs, your financial officers, and the agency heads, as well as the board directors, because pick whatever board you want to. Those are the professionals that make up the board, and they need professional help. That's why we have Department of A&I that covers a lot of that as their board of directors, director of the board, and then provide the CFO. So we do have safeguards in there, but we spray the weeds on our lawn, and every once in a while one comes up, and you have to correct it.
Any further discussion on sections 305, 306, or 307? Seeing none, we will close those sections. And Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the Committee of the Whole begs leave to rise and sit again at 2 p.m.
Before we take action on that motion, any committee announcements? Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Committee number 8, Transportation, will meet in about 15 minutes in Capital Extension Room E3 to consider House Bill 18, House Bill 81, House Bill 82.
Thank you. Other committee announcements? Chairman Flitner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am trying to get up the details on my committee, TRW number 6, waiting for my phone to bring up that information, which it is not. So we are meeting about 10, 15 minutes after at noon recess down there where we always meet. 2 bills we'll be discussing. So, oh, thank you. I have been saved. We will be discussing House Bill 54, State Parks Recreation Management Authority, and House Bill 72, Hunting License Application Funds, in room E005. Thank you.
Any other announcements? If not, with that, we're in recess and, Speaker Barlow, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So members, when we come back from our noon recess, we'll certainly finish out the budget. We'll close out Committee of the Whole on the budget, and then we'll take up the rule. That's the intention. We'll take up that rule that will be proposed by the majority floor leader, and then we'll go into Committee of the Whole regular. So we got to knock out, 10 or 15 bills, hopefully this afternoon on Committee of the Whole, so that tomorrow we're going to have a full day on second reading of the budget first, and then see where we are during the day. So that's kind of, I just want to lay out order of business for this afternoon. What I hope you'll agree is what we need to get to. Certainly, so enjoy your lunch hour. There's several receptions and several of them off of the premises, so enjoy those, and we'll look forward to seeing you all back at 2 o'clock. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your House Appropriations Committee will meet at 8:30 tomorrow morning to do the feed bill, Senate File 2, and the continuation of Senate File 66 and 67.
And Chairman Nicholas, budget amendments are still due by 5 p.m. this evening. So if you have a second reading budget amendment, please get it to LSO by 5 p.m. Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to consider 2 bills, House Bill 92, Abortion Prohibition Supreme Court Decision, and House Bill 149, Human Life Equality Prohibiting Discriminatory Abortions. What I am planning to do is allow witnesses to testify on both bills at the same time, so as to not have people popping up and down and zooming in and out, just so that people know that.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 9, Minerals Business Economic Development, will meet tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. We will continue with House Bill 141, then move on to House Bill 89, and we should have time to hear the Speaker's Bill 123.
Madam Minority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, privilege. Thank you. He was a little bit modest. One of the luncheons that we have today is the Wyoming Youth Services Association, and each year they honor one legislator of the 90 of us, and this year it is Speaker Barlow.
All right. With that, we are in recess until 2 o'clock.